We're on a road to nowhere. Come on inside. Taking that ride to nowhere. We'll take that ride. I'm feeling okay this morning. And you know, we're on the road to paradise. Here we go, here we go. There's a city in my mind. Come along and take that ride, and it's alright, baby, it's alright. And it's very far away, but it's growing day by day, and it's alright, baby, it's alright. Would you like to come along, and you can help me sing this song, and it's alright, baby, it's alright. There's a city in my mind. Come along and take that ride, and it's alright, baby, it's alright. And it's very far away, but it's growing day by day. It's alright, baby, it's alright. They could tell you what to do, but they'll make a fool of you, and it's alright, baby, it's alright.
Hello, fam. I see some of you already joining. Thank you so much. And of course, that was the wonderful Jessie Jett doing Talking Heads for me. So tonight I have an awesome guest, and shout out to Ryan Parker, who or I believe it's our Ryan Parker, who actually did the video that I'm going to be sharing. Basically regarding my guest tonight. I haven't had candidates in 14 months because I've kind of given up on electoral politics for the most part. But my guest, Matthew Hoh, he's really incredible, and he's making the rounds, and the Dems are pulling their fuckery. So of course we want to call that out. So thank you so much for joining us, Matthew. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Joy. I'm really happy to be here, be able to talk with you. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, it's Ryan. He's a great guy, a DSA member, and did a terrific job with that video. One of many people who've really helped us, documenting the fraud and the lies of the Democratic Party as they try and kick us off the ballot. Not allow us to have our constitutional right to, be on the ballot. But when they do it, it's okay for them. And then they claim we're being frauds, and the whole thing is just all upside down. But yeah.
Right. Absolutely. It's absolutely crazy. And, what it comes down to is, you cannot say that you support democracy if you're okay with anyone getting kicked off the ballot, period. Right. And people like to say, people like to cheer. I'm in Pennsylvania, and our Greens were kicked off in 2020. And I am not a Green. I'm an independent. I voted Green. But regardless, I was still pissed because it's not fair. It's not democratic. So first, I actually want to share Ryan's video, because I'm sure a lot of my viewers have seen it, but just in case, it kind of speaks to what's going on probably all across the country, but specifically in North Carolina right now. So let me bring this up. Oh, bastards.
At least it's not a campaign ad for a Democrat or a Republican.
Okay, so you're from North Carolina Democrats, correct? And you use the public information based on the petition that I signed, correct? For getting the Green Party candidate onto the ballot, correct?
Well, that's the petition that you signed.
Correct. Yeah. I'm fully aware of that.
Yeah, so we're just asking people if they were interested in removing their name from the petition. Some people signed it and didn't know they were being misled. Some people didn't even sign it, but their signature was on there. So that they're investigating that too.
Yeah, I get it. But you have to audit the petition, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how that works. Like, they just contracted me to pull around and ask people.
Okay. About if I wanted to take my name off of the list,
Right.
and that's because like I'm not following. I mean, I signed it because I wanted the Green Party to be on the ballot.
Right. So we're just letting people know that it would be a disadvantage for Democrats and an advantage for Republicans.
Right. You guys should have further left, and then that wouldn't happen. So it's like I want a third party
Right.
on the ballot. I want ranked choice voting so we have a viable third party candidate. And if the Democrats are concerned about that, then they should probably change the politics of it, as opposed to coming to my house and trying to get me to get my name off the petition.
Right.
So I mean, this is a lot. I mean, you guys are coming because other people that I know have signed that petition. I said they're coming for you. So this tactic, I don't agree with it. I understand why you're doing it. Politically, I understand why you're doing it. It's dirty pool. I don't like it. But honestly, it's and I understand legally you can do this. But from a political standpoint, I don't agree with it.
Okay.
And I understand I can remove my name from that list, but I don't choose to.
Okay, and that's completely fine.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's completely fine.
Okay.
All right, well, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry about it.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
Like, okay, shout out again. Seriously, just shout out again. You're amazing, Ryan. Oh my god. Let me pull this back up. Are you still there? Oh, there we go. Okay. So, I mean, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. There was nothing rude or anything, and he held it down. So, props again. So that's insane. And to say people signed it not knowing exactly what they were signing. So, have you spoken, like, to be fully transparent, have you spoken to anyone who has said they were misled or that they removed their signature? I think you're muted.
I am muted. Thank you.
Okay.
You think, right, after 2.5 years of this, doing all this, the Zoom stuff, we'd be more second nature. But, I have not spoken to anyone who's removed themselves. I do know that after almost 2 weeks or week and a half of them doing this type of thing, calling people, texting people, showing up at their homes, only 140 out of 16,000 signatures were claimed to have been wanted to have removed. And that has to be also understood with the fact that they were calling people and they were saying they were with the Green Party. They showed up at people's homes and said they were with the State Board of Elections or at the Secretary of State's office. So of those 140 people who asked to be removed, we don't know how many of them said they would be removed after they were lied to. I mean, this is the whole thing that's such the grand farce of it all, is we're being accused of fraud and we didn't do any fraud. And here the Democratic Party comes in and deliberately commits fraud, lies to people, telling them that we are the Green Party and we are calling you to ask you to take your name off the petition, which is just inane, right? Makes no sense, but that's what they were doing. And so, this is what we're up against here is this willingness, this smugness, the arrogance of power to do exactly just what they feel like they want to do because they are entitled to do it. So whatever keeps them in power is what they're going to do. And, one of the things as we were out there, we collected more than 22,000 signatures, 22,530, I think we collected, and over a course of months. And
how many did you need?
We needed 13,865.
Wow.
And so we collected 22,530. And of those 22,530, 15,953 were verified by the county boards of elections. So we were over by 2,100. And for people who aren't familiar with petitioning, you're always going to have signatures that don't count. I mean, basically, a rule of thumb is for every 4 you collect, only 3 are going to count. 1 is going to get thrown out for a variety of different reasons. And it's not nefarious. It's just the way it works. People put the wrong address down. They think they're registered. They're not registered. It's a whole host of reasons. So, we were right in that range. And I mean, the Elias law firm contracted by the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, although there's really no difference between those organizations, was down here doing exactly what you saw they were doing, approaching people, whether by phone call, by text, or by visiting them at their homes. Some of the people who were visited at their homes actually had already told them on the phone or by text, no, I don't want to take my name off. And they still showed up at their homes. And so it was harassment. People were getting phone calls 7 times a day, and then, like I said, the deliberate misleading, to use a polite word, but it was not, it's lying about who they were. Sometimes they would say they were the Democrats. Sometimes they would refuse to say who they were. And other times they would say they were the Green Party. And as we know, when they showed up at people's homes, they also said they were from the Secretary of State's office or the State Board of Elections. So really just doing whatever they wanted in order to try and keep us off the ballot. And, that's parallel to the issue we had with the State Board of Elections, where the State Board of Elections, in a very brazen partisan decision, did not certify us, even though we had the verified signatures. They pointed to irregularities in signatures that had never been verified. So signatures that the counties had said, these don't count. The State Board of Elections then said, well, because they are, and we knew about 200 of what they were talking about, right? So less than 1% of what we collected. We knew that there was something about 200 or so of those. Over 30 days, they looked at these signatures. They never showed us any evidence of wrongdoing or anything that would say, hey, the Green Party was being shady, and so they shouldn't get on the ballot. But what they said was, because there's a July 1st deadline to certify us, because there are these 200, again, these signatures that are irregular, there could be more. And because there could be more, we need more time to investigate. But because tomorrow is the deadline for certification, we can't certify. And so they decided they voted not to certify us, again, in a very partisan fashion, 3 Democrats against 2 Republicans. And the whole thing was always in bad faith, Joy, because we had to turn our signatures into the state by June 1st. And you had a July 1st deadline for us to be certified. In addition to the state having to certify us, we also had after we were certified, we would have to hold a nominating convention. And then we would have to have our folks go out and register as Greens with their local county boards of elections. And then we would have to have our candidates go and file for the offices they were seeking. So we had a number of things we had to do after certification. And this just, again, shows the bad faith in all this by a State Board of Elections, that they were never planning to certify us because they didn't schedule a certification hearing until June 30th. So even if they had certified us, they were going to give us less than 24 hours or roughly a day to get all those other things done. So you could see that this was a deliberate effort to keep us off the ballot, one side being the Democratic Party and the other side being the State Board of Elections.
Wow. Incredible. And, in the 5 years I've done this show, I've interviewed over 200 candidates, leftist, if you want to say candidates from across the country. I have heard this shit so many times. It is so frustrating. And it's not just Green and independent. Like sometimes it's like, I'm going to run within the party, right, type thing, but you're a little too far left for them. I mean, when we were getting signatures for Bernie in PA, they tried to pull this shit until over 30 of us went in the office in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and we sat on the floor until they did their fucking job. So
Right,
it,
right.
I mean, it happens all the time. And since I assume you guys are closed, primary.
We have open primaries down here.
Oh, you do? Okay, that's
We do.
good.
Yeah,
We
do.
have closed. That's another hurdle in itself. But yeah, I think it's so important for people to realize that, like, for greens, you know, a lot of people, well, every state I know of, you need signatures, and usually it's a percentage of the people. Is that how yours works?
Right. So how it works, and it's actually 2 tiers, and everyone knows, right? Every state's different, right? For us to get on the ballot, we needed almost 14,000 signatures, which is 1/4% of the most recent gubernatorial election. That's how they come up with that number.
I
The
see.
the for if you're an independent, though, say I wanted to run as an independent for the U.S. Senate, I would have needed 83,000 verified signatures, which meant, you know, Joy, right? You know, I mean, that means you've got to collect at least 110, 120,000 at
Sure.
least to make that 83,000 mark, right? I mean, so how that's just frankly impossible. It's just the
Yeah.
resources required for that. You have to be Michael Bloomberg to be able to accomplish something like that. You really do. I mean, because that's one of the things that really surprised me. I'm a first-time political candidate. I don't know any of this stuff. You know, I hear we got to go out, go get some signatures. All right, we'll get volunteers and we'll hand out some clipboards and we'll go to the farmer's market. And how hard can this be? And it's a lot harder than that. It's very time consuming. It ends up costing you a lot of money and we did end up having some contractors. They accounted for about 5% of our work. The other 95% of everything we did was with our people. And we had some amazing volunteers, folks who were able to give us a ton of time, but a lot of people wanted to give us their time, but they couldn't afford to be out there 10, 20, 30 hours a week. And that's the time that we needed. So we raised the money and we paid our own people. We paid them $20 an hour so they could be out there. And it worked so well because, you know, we were talking to tens of thousands of people. So we were able, because there's our folks who were doing it, they were able to tell people who we were. And they were able to listen as well, right? And really have great conversations. So this really was a beneficial experience for us. But, you know, for the idea of it, though, is that the petitioning process itself is so onerous. It's so burdensome in terms of time, resources, money, effort. You know, during that, all we could do was do ballot access. You're not out there campaigning in a normal sense. You're just out there trying to get on the ballot. You know, you just, hey, can you sign this for me, please? You know, and now even on the back end, as I'm learning about this, the back end of the ballot access, the back end of the petitioning experience is similar, where they are going to jam you up with legal. They're going to jam you up with bureaucracy. They're gonna smear you like they did to us and say that we're under criminal investigation for fraud. So now any interview I do is not about the fact that half of school kids in North Carolina qualify for free lunch because that, you know, that's our poverty rate down here. You know, I mean, no discussion about that kind of stuff or healthcare or anything else. It's about, hey, Matt, when did you guys stop committing fraud? You know, so the narrative is controlled. So all our effort, all our resources, all our attention and time is focused on this right now still. And the narrative is about how the Green Party committed fraud to get on the ballot. And again, there's no evidence. I mean, we were never shown anything. I mean, like, the whole thing is, and then juxtapose that, like I was saying, with the fact that the Democratic Party was down here committing fraud themselves while accusing us of it. So it is, but this is the experience. This is, you know, hey, you wade into the alligator pit, you walk into the alligator pond, you're going to get bit. And this is a good fight to be in. It's the fight we want to have. And we're happy for this fight. It proves our point. It validates why we're doing this. It validates why our folks are out here trying to build a multi-party democracy, doing this to get something for the people they love, because they know the two-party system and the foundation of that, the corporations and the banks, are what is responsible for the suffering that so many people are experiencing, especially people that we love. And that's why we do this. And so to have this happen validates to us why we're doing it. So, you know, as onerous as it is, as much as this is all just such bullshit, it actually, you know, to use maybe a more polite phrase than bullshit, we are doing our best to make lemonade out of lemons here, if that's more.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys committed fraud, why are they going through all the trouble of going door to door and calling people to invalidate if they have tangibles. It makes no sense. Now,
Yeah.
I also heard, did you yourself get contacted to get you?
Oh, they were calling me. They were calling me, but for whatever reason, the auto dialer they were using, it would disconnect. You would try and, because what happened is that, so 3 or so weeks ago, we knew that Mark Elias's law firm was down here, right? And that, of course, triggered us because we know who this is, and this is the most prominent Democratic attorney, and his law firm is the biggest Democratic law firm. And okay, what are they going to do? And a few days, half a week after we realized that, we started getting phone calls from people saying, hey, someone called me and they asked me to take my name off the petition. And then we started getting phone calls from people saying, hey, you guys called me and asked me to take your name off the petition. And we started getting emails saying the same thing. And we said, what the heck is going on here? We realized very quickly what was going on. And so, I mean, it was the same phone numbers that kept calling over and over again. And yeah, they were calling me, they were calling our folks in our party. And then, but I could never get the connection to pick up for whatever reason. The auto dialer would drop, I guess. And so then I'm sitting on my couch a few days later and I get a text message, and basically asking me to confirm and whether I signed a petition. So I say yes. And then it went into a whole pitch about how the Green Party helps Republicans, abortion is in the balance, et cetera, et cetera. Please take your name off of the ballot. They would do things. They got their messaging would change. They quickly switched from not just being about the elections in the balance, the Green Party helps Republicans, but it quickly went to the Green Party has committed fraud, with this petitioning process. And so trying to scare people, right, into like, oh, I want my name off of that then because I might be implicated somehow. And that's what they're doing here as well. This works on so many levels. And this is something, Joy, as you were saying, they do all over the place. And this is where Mark Elias really earns his chops, right? Is when he's general counsel for John Kerry in 2004. And this is where they really establish a lot of this type of operation. This is really, really hone it, as far as I've been told and I've come to understand it, is in 2004, how to really suppress independents and third-party candidates when they go after the Greens and after Nader. And so, they change their messaging up as it goes. And they say things that, again, like that we've committed fraud. And the idea be that they're scaring people. And that has this effect of causing people to not want to sign petitions in the future. Right. And in the fact that like our folks, our people who are out there working, they have to now talk to the state board of elections. They're not being threatened, but they've got to go speak to an investigator from the government about this. So it just puts a fear over everybody, and it causes people either not to want to sign or, maybe not to participate so much in the future. So it's very nefarious on a whole bunch of levels. And the whole purpose is basically, their goal, right, is to get to the point where the electorate, the people who vote, are people who only subscribe to Fox News or MSNBC. That's their goal, is to have the whole voter pool being basically people who have cable news subscriptions, and that's all.
And I mean, it's more advantageous if the Republicans win for the Democrats, because we see what's going on now. They've had control for 2 years and they're doing less than nothing. So it's pretty apparent they would actually not care if Republicans won, because then they'd start raking in big dollars again and be able to obfuscate and, well, it's held up because of them, right. And all the shit libs forget what happened the past 2 years and rinse and repeat.
Well, they've been able to do it for decades now. They've been complicit with the neoliberal policies, the financialization policies of the last 50 years that have squeezed all the money to the top, right? Have squeezed all the money out of the working class and now squeezing all the money out of the middle class. I mean, what is it? The polling is showing that like almost 2/3 of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck at this point, right? I mean, so you have, the Democrats' messaging is more or less, be happy with the crumbs we're giving you, right? I mean, because the Republicans won't even give you crumbs. So you better be happy with the crumbs you're getting right now. That's their messaging, and they feel that they're entitled to votes from people who are, living off of those crumbs. And what we're trying to do, of course, is provide that alternative, give people another option. And that's completely anathema. So what I said before, they're threatened by the folks that went out there and did this great work for us. They're threatened by the enthusiasm that we were met with by tens of thousands of people for having more options on the ballot, for having a multi-party democracy. And they're also very much threatened by the idea of some party being on the ballot representing working families. And because representation of working families is a danger to the profits of the corporations and the banks that are the foundation of the two-party system. And that is ultimately why they are so desperate to keep, this campaign, keep the Green Party, keep independents, keep other third parties off of the ballot, because of that danger that we represent to the profits of the corporations and the banks.
Absolutely. Any kind of accountability is terrifying to them. And you coming out and saying, hey, I support, Medicare for all and things like that. It's like, oh my God, no. Because if he talks about it, people will like it. And then if people like it, then we have to act like we care. And it's like this whole cyclical thing. And you can't do that to them. It's so bananas to watch. Have you talked to the other, like the Dem candidates? Do you think they'll debate you?
No, they won't. No, they won't deign to speak with me, and I'm not sure what I would have to say to them anyway. They're out fundraising off of the loss of Roe. They're out fundraising off of the continued mass murder of people by guns in this country. They're out fundraising off of the January 6th hearings. And none of that will ever come to anything, will ever amount to anything. With the Dobbs decision, the DSCC, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, they set records for fundraising the day of Dobbs and the day after Dobbs. So in the history of the Democratic Party, their two best days of fundraising were the day of the day Dobbs was announced and the day after Dobbs. So this because people get upset about this. Well, the Dems are just trying to fundraise off of it. Well, the evidence is pretty clear that it works pretty well for their fundraising. And the fact that they did nothing for 50 years to protect Roe, to protect the rights of women, to protect human rights, because this is what this basically is. Healthcare is a human right. That they did nothing other than play footsie with pro-life Democrats and just give lip service to the people. And then it gets shown that, oh man, they really do make some money when people lose their rights. The same thing too. I guarantee if you looked at their fundraising, next time we have a massacre, next time school kids are killed by someone, look at the fundraising numbers. It mirrors, it just mirrors the sociopathy that we have in the society. And you have to understand that a lot of times that mirror, it's more than that. It's actually co-joined.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely, the good news about Roe though is Biden is appointing a pro-life Republican right now. So that is good. Obviously it's Bernie and Susan Sarandon's fault, but we'll deal with it. It's all good because, it's appointed by someone with a D at the end of their name. So
right, exactly. Down here in North Carolina, there's 15 federal seats, right? So the Democrats have 15 candidates, 1 for Senate and 14 for the House offices. They have 1 person out of 15 running on Medicare for all, running for single payer. 1 out of 15. That's it. They also have 1 person to balance it all out. Don Davis running for the U.S. House in the 1st District. When he was in the state Senate, he routinely voted against Planned Parenthood. And then they got a guy in District 9, Ben Clark, who's still in the state Senate. And he just in May voted for North Carolina's Don't Say Gay legislation, right? So they have as many people running for federal office who are voting for Don't Say Gay, voting against Planned Parenthood, as they do who are running for Medicare for all. As people die, literally die. We're not being right. Before the pandemic, we knew tens of thousands of people were dying because of for-profit healthcare. And now, as we know from the National Academy of Sciences report, which other people have been saying before that, but that that most recent report really documents it well. 1 in 3 COVID deaths in this country are attributable to a lack of healthcare. Basically, 330,000 people were killed in this country by for-profit healthcare. So you're telling me that we're not going to run on that? We're not going to have this discussion? We're not going to have people on the ballot who are representing? I mean, it's mind-boggling that this is the point we're at, where something that important doesn't even have representation on the ballot.
I mean, they're the expendables, though. They're the poors.
I know. I've seen that, Joy. Like, I honest to God, I had this experience on Twitter. I don't really engage too much on Twitter. I tweet my thing out, and then for my own mental health, I kind of leave it alone, right? But every once in a while, I'll go through and read the stuff. And this one person, she was saying how there's no difference between me and the Democratic candidate, Sherry Beasley. And so I said, well, here's our issues and blah, blah, blah. And as we kind of got into it, I was trying to be polite. She said something that none of that matters. Healthcare doesn't matter. The only thing that matters are the differences between the Democrats and the GOP. And I looked at her profile, and she was showing a horse in her profile. Like, obviously, this is not a person who has a concern about healthcare. And that's what I've found over and over again is that, and I don't want to overgeneralize here, but what I have found these last 6 months as the campaign's been going on is that the people who come up to me and say, you're going to ruin it for the Democrats, don't worry about healthcare. No, you don't have to know. Talking about housing is not something that needs to be discussed right now. Any of these issues, right? Living wages, the war on drugs, the climate, that crime against humanity at the border. I mean, all kinds of different things that distinguish us very clearly from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Those don't matter. What I generally find is that the people who say that have healthcare, right?
Sure.
People who say that aren't seeing their rents going up by 20 or 25%. People who say that don't know people who are victims of mass incarceration or living ruined lives because they were arrested 9 years ago for a nonviolent drug charge. They don't know people who've overdosed and died. I've got 6 people in my life who've overdosed and died. And that's if you're a combat veteran, that's an experience that happens because that's what happens to these guys. They come home and, so that's what I have found is that the people who argue against Medicare for all or say it's not important now, those are the people who have health care and they don't have loved ones who are suffering. I mean, again, I am doing this. I have people in my life, people I love, people who are very close to me who have to check their banking account before they go to the doctor. And they end up making dangerous decisions for themselves and their families. And that's why I'm doing this. And that's why all the people in my campaign, that's why the people in North Carolina Green Party, all the folks we have working on this for the last, better part of a year are out here doing this. And that's what scares them. And that's what threatens them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm part of, I'm a lead organizer with M for M for All. We did the 56 Medicare for All marches last year. And, we get comments like that all the time. And I'm like, it must be so nice to be privileged to the point that you don't even have to have empathy. I mean, it's so sad. But yeah, I mean, I do appreciate, I saw your tweet on medical debt. You said 1 out of 4 people in North Carolina have medical debt. And I'll be honest, if you type in medical debt, I'm the only one who's going to come up. So, because I feel like I'm the only person who ever tweets about it. So I really appreciated that.
It's not as big, right, as student debt. Student debt's what, 1.8 trillion or something like that, and medical debt runs into the hundreds of billions. So I mean, it's not. But what that statistic is, and actually, I'll correct you, Joy, because it's not medical debt. It's collections for medical debt. Oh. So we have 1 in 4 adults in North Carolina are in collections for medical debt. Wow. You can look this up because I looked it up. I couldn't believe that. So I went and looked it up through the source. It's you can look at the Urban Institute, and the Urban Institute has all kinds of data on debt. They have data for not just medical debt, but also consumer debt as well as student debt. And then all told how that affects, you can do it by state level or nationally. And so the Urban Institute has a lot of great information on that. But I couldn't believe that when I read that. And it was written it was in paragraph 8 of a news story. And actually the way it was written wrong, because it said 1 in 5 North Carolinians. And when I went and looked at the data, it was like, okay, but that would be now you're including children in that number. So it really is 1 in 4 adults have that. And again, it's
Right.
not medical debt. They're in collections for medical debt. And take away the morality of that. Take away the justice of that, right? You don't have to have the empathy you just spoke about, Joy. Just look at it pure dollars and cents, pure your economics, pure straightforward linear thinking. How is that sustainable? I mean, 1 in 4 people are in collections. How is that sustainable as a society, as an economy? And what angers me, and again, this is the need to have a socialist party on the ballot, to have a third party movement, to have a third party movement that's connected to a larger movement, right? Because you can't have a party that exists only for itself. Otherwise, what you get are the Democrats and the Republicans. But we had a story today. CNBC declared North Carolina the best state for business in the United States. And you look at that and you say, you know why it's the best state for business? Not for the people, but for business, is because 1 in 4 North Carolinians are in collection for medical debt. Again, 52% of school kids in North Carolina qualify for free lunches. Why is that? Well, that's because we don't have just wages. We don't have fair wages. People are not being paid enough to live in this state. And that's why we are the best state for business. I mean, the way it's propagandized, the way people are shut out, the way, as you said, Joy, before, people are ignored, they're dismissed, they're disappeared, they're the poors, they don't count. You see that over and over again, where there's triumphalism. One of the articles about this feat of North Carolina being the number 1 state for business in the country was how what did the article say? Basically summed up as a bipartisan success story. How Democrats and Republicans put aside their differences to make North Carolina the best state for business. We might have well just said put aside their differences to continue to fuck over everybody who's not in the 1%.
Yep. Absolutely. Wow. It's so crazy when you live in a state and you see things like that and you're like,
Right.
I live here? No. Wow. You touched on being a veteran a little. Do you want to just kind of share, where you served, what you did, and why you became anti-war now?
Yeah, I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years. I took part in the wars in Iraq, and then I was in the State Department. I was in the war in Afghanistan. And after being in Iraq and then being in Afghanistan, this is 2009, seeing the wars were no fundamentally different after years of lying to myself, making excuses, taking part in something that I'll regret for the rest of my life. I'm shamed and of it. I broke with it and resigned publicly. And joined the anti-war movement, and that's where I've been for the last 12 years. It's something that again is not represented on the ballot. Otherwise, both the Democrat and the Republican are going to vote for the new defense budget. It's going to be $850 billion. We're on President Obama started us on this spending that's now going to total almost $2 trillion over a couple decades for new and modernized nuclear weapons. And so the Democrat and the Republican are going to go along with that. And, it's just one of the things that distinguishes us from the corporate parties is our opposition to war, our opposition, and whether that be, again, the wars overseas or the wars here at home. The danger where it goes, and not even where it goes, but just the fact that there's not been any accountability for what has transpired. The deaths and the ruination of tens of millions of people overseas, their victimization, their suffering for corporate profits, and for the megalomania of people in Washington, D.C. There's never been any accountability, and that I have a real great and deep pit of anger over that, and that's part of one of the things that motivates me to do this campaign.
And we see, in addition to that, well, Build Back Better had even more money for the MIC. So if that passed, it would be in addition to. And then in addition to the so-called defense budget, which is really a war budget, they are giving $1 bajillion to Ukraine. And this, I saw some of your quotes on Ukraine and you nailed it. Why don't you just give a brief synopsis on your thoughts about Ukraine and all these wonderful emojis all over.
I love it too, because when those quotes come out, like yesterday, the first comment decried me for being a stooge of the Kremlin, and the second comment decried me for being an American imperialist. So you know, I mean, like, you get it from both sides.
The irony.
I want to touch back on the money real quick, just so people really get a sense of what the military industrial complex is, the Leviathan it really is. So that $850 billion is just the base budget for the Department of Defense. That does not include the Department of Energy's nuclear weapons budget, does not include money for the intelligence agencies, does not include the $300 billion a year for the Veterans Department, and it doesn't include the almost $200 billion a year we spend on interest and debt payments for past military spending in wars. When you put all that together, you're talking about $1.4 trillion a year in military spending by the United States. And so it just had people understand how actually big it is. And anything like that, as you know, is going to be a living organism. It's going to be a Leviathan. It's going to have a purpose in and of itself. And that's what, when people talk about the deep state before Donald Trump got in and all that nonsense, that's what any organization that's got is bringing in more than $1 trillion a year is going to have its own inertia, and it's going to be its own living organism. It goes back to like what Steinbeck says in The Grapes of Wrath when he's talking about the banks, that they have to continue to grow or they'll die. You know, I mean, this is what we're looking at. And unless we check that, you can understand why this is an existential danger. But, you know, with Ukraine, the money is so insidious in all this. My friend Andrew Coburn just wrote really well about this. And Andrew was talking about how, yes, you've got the $50 billion that has been given to Ukraine by the United States government, half of which goes right to American defense contractors. So that's never even going to leave the United States. But in addition, you have countries all throughout Europe now using this as justification to purchase American weapons. And Andrew goes through $6 billion from Finland, $12 billion from Poland, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, they're buying tanks, they're buying F-35s, they're buying this thing, that thing, the other thing. You know, and the other thing as well is that after 2 decades of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, you have the need for enemies that justify the traditional United States Army, Navy, and Air Force. So what you've seen for a decade or so now is the desire of the Army to have a threat like Russia, because that justifies having large tank and infantry units in Europe, right? And what you can see is that in the last couple of years, the Army actually added a couple of at least 2 armored brigades to its fourth. You can't justify that with wars in Iraq or Afghanistan, but you can justify that with a war with Russia. And the same goes for the Navy and the Air Force. Afghanistan is not going to justify a $15 billion aircraft carrier. China and Russia will, right? The next B-21 Spirit, the next bomber from the Air Force, those are going to be $2 billion a plane, right? You can't justify that with Iraq. You need Russia and China. So you can see how insidious all this builds. But, you know, the war in Ukraine, you can't divorce it from all the other wars. You can't divorce it from this militarism. You can't divorce it from the people who are running it, who are in charge of it, because they're the same people who ran and were in charge of all the other wars. But we have this mentality here that we're going to put Ukraine in a special box, that somehow it's not connected at all to the war in Iraq, the war in Libya, the war in Syria and Afghanistan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, what you then have is you have these policies where we were pushing Russia, and Russia was pushing back. I mean, I'll be the first to condemn Russia for its actions. It illegally invaded and occupied and is committing horrendous crimes in the war. But war is nothing but one crime. War is nothing but organized murder. So, I mean, the idea that somehow Russia is doing something different than other nations at war, I don't really get that. But, certainly what happens is you get this pushing match between the Americans and the Russians, and that's precipitated by the Americans advancing to the Russians' border. So, of course, the Russians push back. But you've got these geniuses in Washington, D.C., who, when we stage a coup in Ukraine in 2014 and depose the democratically elected president, who, was incredibly corrupt and awful, but we deposed him and staged a coup. Putin's response was to send people into Eastern Europe and into Eastern Ukraine and to take Crimea. So these brilliant people in DC said, well, we just got to push harder. And we saw the same thing happen in Syria with Putin, where, we pushed up against him in Syria and he sent his army into Syria, and the same thing happened in Georgia as well, where we were pushing Georgia, and Putin pushed back and sent his army into Georgia. So why did anyone think that pushing Putin was going to result in anything than what we're seeing? So this is it's hard to believe I'm saying this because the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, were so incredibly such incredible instruments of propaganda. But this war is probably the most forceful propaganda any of us have ever seen. Anyone who tells you they know what's going on in Ukraine who's not actually there is either lying or they're a fool, because the media coverage has been just so horrific. But it comes back to this thing, and I know I've been rambling for a bit now because now you got me started, Joy. You got me cranked up on this, right? The idea though is look, when this thing happened in February, when Russia invaded in February, I said, the only thing I know for certain is that nobody knows how this is going to end. Nobody knows what's going to come from this. And the second thing I know is that no one will ever be held accountable. And I mean, the United States has this policy in Ukraine where we want an endless war there. The idea is eventually that this will exhaust the Russians. That will then cause the Putin government to fall, and then we'll be able to take all their oil. What I would see happening before that is the Zelensky government falls and something else comes in its place. And war is nothing but a breeding ground of unintended consequences. It's uncontrollable. I mean, look at the history of look what happens in Vietnam, or what happens in Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot. I mean, like just look what happens in Afghanistan with Al Qaeda and then the Taliban. Look what happens in Iraq with Al Qaeda in Iraq, and Syria with the Islamic State. I mean, what can occur in Ukraine is unknowable, it's unpredictable, and it's uncontrollable. And that's the danger that we're playing with here. And we, not you and I or anyone watching this, of course, but our leadership in DC, they're so willing to go along with this. And it comes back to those prophets of the military industrial complex and the megalomania that resides in DC as well as in Moscow, because I don't want to take any agency away from them as well. I mean, we've got two oligarch-driven systems fighting over Ukraine right now.
Absolutely. And I do want to also get to the hero behind you, Julian. So, that segues perfectly, because without people like Julian, we aren't going to know about so many of these wars. We're not going to know about so much of what goes on. And right now, he's going to be extradited to a country he's never lived in. And it's just unprecedented. It is absolutely incredible. We've been doing protests in DC and stuff. It's crazy. Do you have any hope for anything?
I mean, I would hope the new Australian Prime Minister does something. I've not seen what his comments have been in the last couple of weeks, but I
haven't seen any.
Yeah, and he had previously spoken. You have the Mexican president, Lopez Obrador, saying that if the United States extradites Julian Assange, we should give back the Statue of Liberty. So I see hope when I hear things like that. I have no hope, of course, from the American government or the British government whatsoever. And I believe that the policy is not to extradite Assange, is to kill him in prison, is for him to die in prison. and not have to be extradited. Because if he is extradited, then there is a potential that the American government could fail. I don't think that's going to happen with the Supreme Court we have now. And I think the cascading of that, though, Assange is brought here. He's put into a secret trial because he'll go to the district in Northern Virginia where they try these people, just like they did with Daniel Hale, just like they did with John Kiriakou, just like they did with Chelsea Manning, and that's where he will receive a secret trial, something just, something from the the founders would have said King George III would do, kind of thing, right? I mean, I think that's the goal is for him to die in prison, and that serves as a punishment and as a warning to others. Don't do this, because you see what they do to whistleblowers. You saw how they tortured Chelsea, right? My friend Daniel Hale is in the CMU, the Communications Management Unit now of federal prison, being punished for doing nothing other than tell people what had happened. And that's I think that, look, it goes back to what Neil Sheehan, who was New York Times journalist, who wrote one of the two best books about the Iraq and Afghan wars. I always tell people, if you want to understand the Iraq and Afghan wars, read Sheehan's Best in the A Bright Shining Lie, and David Halberstam's The Best and the Brightest. And both those books, of course, are about Vietnam. But if you read those books, you will understand the Iraq and Afghan wars as well. But Sheehan said that when he covered the Dan Ellsberg Pentagon Papers trial, he came to understand and came to realize that government secrets, the whole classification program, is not meant to protect the American people from an enemy. It's meant to protect the American government from its people. And that's what they're doing here. And that's what they're doing with Julian. That's what they're doing with Daniel. That's what they will continue to do to anybody who dares be a truth teller, if it embarrasses them, if it makes them uncomfortable, or if it reveals any of their mass crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. The last time Marianne Williamson was on my show, she's a huge Julian supporter. Mm-hmm. She protested with us. She was saying how, punishing WikiLeaks for releasing information is kind of like, putting New York Times on trial for publishing the Pentagon Papers. Right. It's equivalent. But WikiLeaks has a perfect score of being authentic and truthful, and that is the most dangerous thing to them.
That is incredibly dangerous to them. Exactly.
That is scary, and it's also scary how many journalists just completely ignore what is happening.
That shows the vapidity of that industry, the celebrity aspect of the industry, as well as to the danger of what access journalism has become there. Actually, this is a good thing. I saw that you tweeted back at Dan Rather today.
Oh yeah.
And I said, you know what? I gotta tell Joy a story about Dan Rather. And this is this actually works out pretty well, because so a bunch of you, when I came out against the Afghan war, and it was a big deal, and I was on the Today Show and all that stuff. Anyway, I had to go up to New York to do an interview with Dan Rather, and at that point he had his own show on like Discovery Channel or something like that. And this is back in winter of 2010, or maybe it was like late fall of 2009. And so they bring me up. They put me in a hotel up there. I sit with Rather for like a 2-3 hour interview. And then we go outside and we're walking around the streets of Midtown, and, we're just talking as they do B-roll. And he says to me, I've been going to Afghanistan for 3 decades now. And that's why I know you're right about this. And then right before I leave, his producer comes up, and this is a whole other story I could tell you sometime about how General Petraeus and his command hired a strategic communications firm to discredit me. And one of the things that they would do is they would write to journalists, to producers, to whoever, and they'd say stuff about me. But really the thing was, if Matt Ho's the kind of person that you want to have on your program, you're not the kind of program that we want to be on. And this is what the producer shows me. And I said, I don't know. What do you want me to do about that? And, Rather had just said to me, I know you're right, because I've been going to Afghanistan for 3 decades and everything else. So that program eventually airs a few weeks later. I'm nowhere to be seen on the program, but one of Dan Rather's correspondents is flying around Afghanistan in a helicopter with Stan McChrystal, and that happened over and over again. I mean, that's the access journalism, and they use it as a carrot and as a stick. But so with Julian, what you're seeing is, yes, journalists, shockingly, not all, because there have been some that have stood up for him, and some organizations that have stood up for him. But the American journalists have not reacted to this in the way that they should be reacting to defend their institution, because this is the gravest danger to the First Amendment, to free press, as well as freedom of speech, that we have seen since the Nixon administration, since the Dan Ellsberg case, right? And it is right up there with all the worst aspects in American history, such as, like, say, John Adams' Sedition Act. I mean, like, this is there has not been anything really worse than this. The potential for what can come from it, if they bring Julian here, put him through a secret trial, find him guilty, it will destroy press freedom as we know it. Every journalist will have to either check with the government before they write anything, or take the risk that they will endure the same fate that Julian did. And Julian, I mean, I met with Julian in the Ecuadorian embassy in 2014. And I remember being there and thinking, my God, he's been here for 2 years already, and that was 8 years ago. And I mean, what they're doing to him is a crime that's equal to all the other crimes they commit. I mean, so again, this war is nothing but organized murder. And that's certainly what they're attempting to do to Julian.
Wow. I digress a little, but I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts. So just kind of observing people and the way they react to Julian, I cannot help but wonder if the whole 2016 Hillary thing is guiding people to, if you think that that's part of the vitriol towards Assange, and that's why people are like so for his extradition.
Yeah, I mean, certainly among the public, among the American government, the intelligence agencies, the Pentagon, they hate him. They hate him for exposing them.
Right.
He shined a light on them, and they're rats, so they hate that. But yeah, among, like, say, the vote blue no matter who crowd, absolutely, which is just completely inane. The Russian government hates WikiLeaks. The FSB hates WikiLeaks because WikiLeaks exposed the FSB's version of what Snowden exposed. The FSB, which is the Russian Interior Security Service, their kind of version of the FBI. WikiLeaks exposed their own surveillance, their mass spying on the Russian people. And the same thing too, when Donald Trump came into office, the first thing WikiLeaks did was put out a big call for his tax returns and any dirt on Trump. WikiLeaks put that out. I don't know if it was on Inauguration Day or the day after. So, I mean, the idea that somehow that these guys are in, and the thing about it too is, and I know a bunch of the NSA folks, the whistleblowers, Drake and Binney and Weeby and stuff like that, and what their point about this whole thing about WikiLeaks being connected to the Russians is that the American government monitors every port into WikiLeaks. So that if it come from the Russians to WikiLeaks, the NSA and the CIA would have been aware of it. Sure. And you don't think that would have been released in some format? And Julian himself said it didn't come from the Russians. Julian's never said anything that wasn't true or inaccurate. He has no reason to make something like that up. So, yeah, I mean, it was just tied into that whole Russiagate hysteria, which was a deliberate plot that had began before the 2016 election. But then once the 2016 election was lost, we have to blame it on something. So we're going to blame it on Susan Sarandon and Jill Stein and the Russians. And interestingly, to bring it back to me, right? Bring it back to my story, right? Mark Elias, the Elias law firm that's down here working against us, excuse me, he is the one who hired Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS are the ones who hired Christopher Steele. That's what gave us the Steele dossier, right? So you
Oh.
see how all these dirty tricks all come back to the same little nest. And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it's again, I mean, I say this probably in every interview I do. I think I quote George Carlin in every interview I do because it comes up over and over again. Like Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. And I mean, that's the reality of it.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like I could talk to you for like 5 hours, but I do want to plug your big day tomorrow. You have some wonderful people I've met with and interviewed. So share what you're doing tomorrow and where people can tune in.
Right. So we are having a virtual rally tomorrow, and we will have a number of Green Party candidates, both former and current, on there. We'll have presidential and vice presidential standard bearers. So we'll have Juma Baraka, Jill Stein, Howie Hawkins, as well as we'll have a number of candidates who are running right now, such as Delia Barrios in Texas for governor, Robin Harris down in Florida, Blazin' Bloom up in Virginia. And so we'll have a really great opportunity to hear a bunch of people who have done it and are out there doing it now, campaigning for their values, campaigning for the people in their lives they've loved, and going against this two-party system that is, corrupt and undemocratic. If you go to our Twitter, my Twitter is at Matthew P. Ho. You can find information there. You can go on Facebook, which is Matt for Senate. I think I should know this. And then, of course, our website. You can sign up to come to the rally via the website, and that's MatthewHoforSenate.org. The last name spelled H-O-H. And you can find it there. And please come join us. Be a great opportunity to hear some folks talk, and you can take part in the discussion as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I adore you. You're amazing. I wish I could vote for you. I really do.
Thank you, Troy.
You're
hey,
awesome.
I mean, thank you. I appreciate that. And keep doing what you're doing. And I didn't even really, a lot of times I'll talk about, and I talked a little bit about, because people want to hear what's your philosophy, what's your strategy, why do you think this is a way forward? And I've got like a 3-pronged kind of strategy of why I'm doing this, why I'm running third party. One of it ties into this idea, like I said before, that a political party can't be a party in of itself, has to be part of a larger movement. And that larger movement is labor organizing. It's community and mutual aid. It's direct action, civil disobedience. It's a whole host of things. But most especially, it's communication, education, media, and that's what you do. And if I was to draw this body out, which would be a terrible drawing, but if I was to draw it out, the communications and the media and the education would be that linchpin, would be that center part of the body. Because if we don't have folks like you who are connecting all of us, who are teaching all of us, who are communicating, allowing us to communicate with each other, those body parts never come into alignment. And so, like, as I said, what you're doing is incredibly important. And so folks out there, please continue to support Joy and folks like her, so that we can build this movement and move this movement forward, because we need that communication centerpiece. So thank you so much for you do, Joy.
Thank you so much. That made my night. Thank you. Thank you all so much for watching. We have our week of action, and then we have our many of us who are lead organizers for M for M for All are going to be in DC for 5 nights. We have a lot planned. Some of it we're not going public with just yet because, wink. Nothing illegal, but, just in case. But definitely go to m4m4all.org. Donate a few dollars if you can, but we have a week of action that people can do things regardless of where they live, just in case you can't make it to DC with us. But thank you again, Matthew. I wish you the best of luck. If you could stick around one moment when we
Sure.
get off the air. But thank
Yeah.
you again, guys. I will read your comments. And thank you so much. Smash that like button, smash subscribe. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thank you all.